Joining us, though, this morning, and what a good time to join, what an opposite time to join in terms of what's breaking down this week, is the MP for Tyree. Is that right? Have I got it right?
Tyree, Michael. Thank you for...
Is it the...
Yeah,
I roll my R. Tyree.
Yeah, excellent.
Okay. Now, you would have seen the New Zealand Herald this morning and a piece from Matthew Hooton that the New Zealand Herald have given some prominence to, Ingrid. And that is that Labour need to change the leadership if they want to win the next election. Your thoughts?
Okay, first, I haven't seen that story. I am an avid reader of the Otago Daily Times, so I've got that in front of me and haven't seen that. Look, Matthew Hooton's a columnist associated with right-wing political parties. He's got his views. It's no big deal to me. That's his opinion. If you want to talk about his opinion, talk to him.
Well, I would have thought, but I mean, the reality is that there's no movement within the Labour Party to replace their leader, is there?
Absolutely not. In fact, it's fascinating to me that going through such a difficult time at the moment with inflation, pressures, on all New Zealanders, it's really difficult. I was looking at the ODT this morning thinking, it's grim reading, international stuff, local stuff. We have got such a tight caucus and there is so much support for Jacinda Ardern. It's interesting to me that Matthew would make a comment like that.
Well, I mean, the fact is that many of the backbenchers, not you, but many of your list backbenchers in particular, owe Jacinda their status, don't they?
Look, there was a red wave at the last election, and she is an extraordinary leader. I think, leaders like that don't come along every generation, because not only is she an excellent communicator, but she's absolutely across the details of reform. She appeals to a lot of people because she's both an intellect and a warm person, and often I think as a leader it's really difficult to get both of those things. You sometimes get someone who's highly intelligent but just doesn't cut it with the people, and other times you've got the warmth but there's no depth under there, and she's extraordinary and we're lucky to have her, and yes, it's unprecedented to have 65 MPs in and a majority in an MMP system.
Yes, unfortunately, Ingrid, you can only go one way. I came in with that 90 blue wave, and when you reach a high point, you've always got the other side of the dip to go through. But I guess, you won't know that. You're a very, very lucky, not lucky MP. You've earned your slot, but you're in a safe Labour seat. If you're always a bit edgy if you're a list MP on the edge, aren't you?
Look, I don't think we can take for granted that any seat is safe, to be honest. We've seen that in 2020. It's up to MPs to work hard where they are for their people, and if they take that for granted, eventually they'll lose their seats, and we've seen that happen. So, my view on safe seats, not safe seats, is that safe seats are earned, and actually there are some seats, like for example, Rangatata, my colleague Joe Luxon, who has really earned that seat, and you couldn't get a more blue seat than that in some ways. So, hard-working MPs get safe seats and can lose them if they stop working hard.
All right. Now, I was talking the truancy issue this morning, Ingrid. You got $88 million, and I was amazed at the statistics. That last year, I've just read them, 60% of truancy was regular school attendance for school children was only 60%, and the government have set a target, which seems incredibly small, of 70% by next year and 75%, I think, by 2026. Why are people truant?
Yeah, it's a really big question, and I'm interested to see the language around it because I think it talks about attendance and truancy. And when I have been speaking to my colleagues who are education spokespeople, I think the word they prefer is engagement, because really it's about how you engage with the school, and we've seen hybrid learning, but there's definitely a deficit there. Easy to blame COVID. I have to say, as a mother of students who did become disengaged during COVID, that it has been really problematic, the disruption to their learning. I don't know if it's a gendered thing, but my daughter continued to engage and actually excelled in a hybrid situation or even lockdowns. My son kind of just just disengaged, and that was in some ways the end of his schooling. He's off to join the army, which is great, but I think COVID has been a massive disruptor.
Is the estimation though, or the target too low, Ingrid? Because I mean, trying to get to 70% and then 75% 2026, that means that 1/4 of children by 2026, if this policy is successful, still won't be regularly attending school. I mean, that's a frightening stat.
Yeah, and I can't comment on those targets. I support the work of our spokespeople in terms of what, how they've set them and what they think the targets should be. And I'm certainly not an education specialist, so I think we have to have targets that are realistic. We can't be just trying to pull numbers out of the sky. But I think if you want some more analysis of why that target was landed on, you need to speak to those spokespeople.
Oh no, that's fair enough.
There has been an inquiry into this by the Education and Workforce Committee. They've had a discussion about it and a debate about it in the House last week. And, I think there is a recognition across all the parties that this has been a really difficult time and a generation that could lose out if we don't get this sorted out. So I'm really pleased that we've got a plan around it.
But I just think the aspiration is so low if you've got still 1/4 of kids that won't be attending school on a regular basis in 4 years from now. It's just extraordinary. All right, now the other thing, listen, the big interesting issue of the last 48 hours has been your Prime Minister, or our Prime Minister, heading off to Australia to talk to the new Australian Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese. 501s. It's something that, are you expecting any change there at all? Because it is something that clearly irritates and upsets politicians of any colour on this side of the Tasman.
Yeah, it's a big one, isn't it? And great that the Prime Minister was the first person to speak to the Australian Prime Minister after it became apparent he was going to win. I think she spoke to him as he was on his way to give his victory speech. She's the first leader to visit him in Australia. So, that shows the strength of the relationship, and I understand that they have known each other previously. He made it clear that he wanted to continue to have a firm border policy, but it would seem, it's such an interesting and difficult policy. It's such a harsh policy, and to my mind, it's hard to believe that this kind of thing exists in our lifetime. It's something we'd imagine would be happening 100 years ago or so. That, I'm optimistic that there will be some movement on it. He's never said that he's going to eliminate the policy, but if anybody can get him to get some movement, it should be a Labour Prime Minister from another country, because we are politically aligned. And I don't, it just goes against our values as wanting an inclusive society and one that's fair and that follows a rule of law and has punishments or deterrents that are proportionate to the crime. And some of the things that people are being deported for are, quite relatively minor offences. Doesn't make them right, but they're minor drug offences, for example.
But, I mean, the problem, they're not likely to be our problem when they come home. The problems are the gang members, and we all know that the proliferation of gangs in Auckland, the arming of them, the increasing violence, the increasing membership, the increasing antisocial activity. The 501s they've been the fire starter, haven't they?
That's right, and I'm sure it's very high on the Prime Minister's agenda, those talks.
Okay, well, I mean, they're here now, so would you like to send them back, Ingrid? Would that be the deal, that the ones that are there we can send back to them? Look,
it's a tricky question, isn't it?
Well, we don't want them either, seriously though, do we? I mean, at the end of the day, the kind of people that have been, the gang leaders and the violent gang leaders and the domestic abusers of serious domestic abuse, we don't want them in our country, do we, Ingrid?
Well, that's why we need to see a softening of this policy.
Okay. And finally, your thoughts. Listen, the other fascinating case is the case of English law versus Pākehā law, Maori law, Lore. The fascinating case of Tommy Murray, who died in Lower Hutt last week, and has been gathered by the Maori's whānau, or the Maori side of his family, and taken back up north against the wishes of his Pākehā wife. Do we need to settle this issue once and for all?
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it, when we have different cultural protocols and we live in this world that is, adopted from a Westminster system, and then we have an Indigenous Te Ao Māori world, and then we have also, very high numbers of people from other cultures, all in this one society with our different worldviews and our different ways of doing things. And it's complicated, and I'm not sure that having, a law on it to clarify it is necessarily the way to go. I think these, again, are questions for our justice spokespeople, but it would seem to me that there are so many individual things going on in individual cases that, it needs to be sorted out on a case-by-case basis, and hopefully so that people can come together and sort it out, because it's terrible when people become conflicted when someone dies, and we see it all the time when people die and there's arguments over their will and their property. It's absurd, because when people pass away, really it should be a time to come together, shouldn't it? Michael, I think I've lost you.
No, sorry, Ingrid, my apologies. I was talking to thin air, my apologies. The only problem with that solution, though, Ingrid, is that you then leave it to a case-by-case basis. It means you do have to end up in the courts. It's an extraordinarily expensive process. If the government doesn't set some sort of legislation, you're really leaving the courts to do your job, aren't you? I'm sort of thinking that an ideal scenario in some ways would be to take a Te Ao Māori approach, go to a marae, talk it out, consensus decision making. That's how some of the best decisions are made, and there's a safe space to have those conversations. That would be my personal view. I don't know that Sarah Murray would mean going to the Northern Marae would be a safe place for her, because she claims that it was a very violent altercation on the Sunday night when the body and casket were taken. And look, I'm not across the facts of that case, okay. But I think finding safe, as a general rule, in my view, finding safe spaces to have difficult conversations is a good starting point, and consensus decision-making, or coming to some kind of agreement where everyone can live with the solution, is always better than having to go down an adversarial court process. But sometimes that's unavoidable. Well, I was just going to say, in this particular case, you don't have the gift of an elongated mediation, do you? In the sense that that person's got to be buried. You can't let that drag out over weeks and months. Okay. Ingrid, what are you doing this weekend? Anything interesting? Yeah, I've got my son is off to the army, as I said. Yeah, so, how exciting.
Farewell for him. Yeah, and judging a speech competition, I think, which is, that's a real honour, and I'm looking forward to learning from the students that are going to be speaking, because I don't know how you felt in Parliament, but I always find it really a great opportunity to listen to other people speaking and debating, look at their styles, what works, what doesn't work, how their personality comes through. So I'm looking forward to learning that from the students that I'll be judging. Well, your son, though, is he off to, where do they do their training? Is he in a sort of the regular Army Force Cadet intake, or what? Yeah, I think he wants to start at Waiouru, and we'll see how he goes. I think he'd like to be in the SAS. I'm hoping that they'll teach him a few things about keeping his room clean and his boots polished. So it's all good. Oh, the lament of every parent. Thank you so much, Ingrid. You have a really good weekend. And I'm incredibly proud of him, actually. So it's a good choice. Glad to see him go. It's been wonderful having him here in Dunedin with me. It really has. He's Maori, is that right? No, he's Rotuman.
Oh, okay. So that's an island in the South Pacific. Is that right?
It is. It's a Polynesian island north of Fiji, which for historical reasons has been, politically part of Fiji, but is probably more akin in culture to Tuvalu or Tonga or Samoa.
Oh, okay.
So it's a fascinating little island.
Because you'll have a lot of culture at Wairau. I had the great pleasure of being shown around their marae about 4 months ago, actually, by a sergeant. But I can tell you, he's going to be bloody cold.
Well, look, it's pretty cold in Dunedin, so he's had some time to acclimatise. And I can't remember if I mentioned that I went up to Oahakia a couple of weeks ago as part of the Foreign Affairs and Defence and Trade Select Committee, but it was so impressive. The New Zealand Armed Forces are really impressive in their discipline, their relaxed way, their friendliness. They're great ambassadors for New Zealand, and so after that trip, I felt really good about the fact that my son's going to be, contributing in that way and be part of that culture. I think our young people do an excellent job overseas, and sometimes they don't get recognised for the cultural relations stuff that they do, particularly around the Pacific, where they're kind of there in a friendly capacity rather than being seen as too authoritarian, and that's of huge benefit to New Zealand.
No, I endorse that 100% because I was talking to somebody in the Australian Armed Forces last year, and he was saying they quite like the Kiwis because the Kiwis can get on with everybody, whereas the Australians tend to be a bit more hard-nosed, and sometimes that puts the backs up of the locals. Ingrid, thank you very much for your call. Nice to talk to you. Have a good weekend.